back to my channel. I'm Veronica with Nurturing Connections Homeschool, where I share tips and tools and encouragement and resources to help you connect with what matters most. Now, in the past few weeks, I've been sharing a ton on planning and how to use my bucket planner in order to plan your homeschool journey. So we talked about starting with the end in mind. We talked about how to create the goals and bucket lists for your whole homeschool journey. We talked about how to plan a homeschool year and how to plan a homeschool term and lesson planning and all of that. But today what we're going to talk about is what to do when nothing goes as planned. Now, the Bible tells us that a man's heart devises his way, but the Lord determines his steps. And for me, that was very much a huge part of my own homeschool journey. From the very beginning, right when we got started, we found midway in, we had to move. And so that whole moving process kind of put a wrench in all of my plans. 4 months later, I found out I was pregnant. And so that shifted things quite a bit for us. Then baby came and we had to make adjustments there. About 8 months later, we moved again. 18 months later, we moved again. We've dealt with special needs. We've dealt with just a number of different challenges. And every time I think this is going to be the perfect homeschool year, I find out that what I think is perfect is not necessarily what the Lord has for our family. And so I've had to shift things around. I've had to keep my eyes on what is most important in order to keep us on track and moving forward toward those goals that we determined early on were of utmost importance. And so that's what I want to share with you today, some tips, some practical things you can do. There'll be 5 tips that hopefully will guide you along the way if you're finding yourself in a challenging season or a season where things are just not going as planned and you've got to make some adjustments in order to keep your homeschool moving forward. And then I'll also share a bonus tip to keep in mind at the end as well. Now, tip number 1, don't tie your homeschool schedule to specific days. If you're finding yourself in one of those seasons where every week is looking different and one week you have to step out for a couple of days, or you have some illnesses that you're dealing with, or elderly grandparents or parents that you're tending to, whatever it is, don't tie it to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So as an example, this is my bucket planner layout. And you'll see there are 5 lines up at the top that can typically be used Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then you have the 6 buckets here and 3 on this side. Instead of writing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday up there, however, I put the school day number. So I'll put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The following week will be 6, 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so forth, all the way to our target goal of 170 days or 180 days, depending on the year and the age of my children. Doing that means that if I do days 1 and 2 and something happens and something prevents me from doing a full day of school, then basically once we're able to get back in, we just go on with day 3 and day 4 and day 5. So it means that you just continue. You pick up where you left off, so you're never truly behind. If that happens a lot and you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and you miss the middle of the week, then you're rewriting your lesson plans the following week and you're bumping things over and it just starts getting really, really messy. So just targeting the days helps you move forward without ever feeling that need that you're really falling behind, because you're able to track your progress and continue on as needed. Now, if you're using agendas like this, you'll notice I do tie my agendas to days because right now we're in a more consistent season. But if I wasn't, I would turn this easily into a loop. And so I would just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way down. And we'd start off with loop 1 the first day, loop 2 the next day. If we're out 3 days, then the following day we just pick up with loop 3 and so forth. And so basically I'm spreading out our subjects in a way that makes sure that we're targeting everything a certain number of times every 5 days, but they're not necessarily being tied to one specific day. So hope that makes sense, but That has been a tool that's really helped me, and I've been able to see exactly where we are in the big picture all the way through by just counting those days and marking our weeks up on a little board that I have up there. Tip number 2, spread out your homeschool year into a year-round year. So when you try to follow the public school system, which goes typically mid-August through the end of May, you limit yourself to those 9.5 months. And so if you have a season where you just can't get a lot of schoolwork done, just spreading it out over those other 2 months can really help alleviate some of that stress and make everything flow a lot more smoothly. Now, I have a video where I share how to map that out, but just kind of a quick overview here. You can see that this perpetual calendar has 6 months on one side or one page, and then the other 6 months are on the other page. And so if you decide that you need to do 180 days for school, for example, then the goal would be to get 90 days of school in these 6 months and 90 in the others. And then it shows you there how many breaks you can take, and you kind of have some flexibility. You can map things around holidays and taking breaks along the way, whatever you need to do, but still getting your goal of those 180 days. Now, of course, everything I'm sharing here, you'll want to make sure to run it by whatever requirements are needed in your state or province, wherever you are. If they require a certain number of days by a certain time, then this may not be the best option, but in most cases, it's definitely something that you can consider. Start off your year when you know you'll be able to be more consistent, and that way if you know of something that's upcoming like baby, then you can take that break where you need to and just spread everything else out as well. All right, number 3, add margin. What this means is add those breaks intentionally throughout the year so that if a child does get sick, there is this time in there that you can just kind of pull from. What I do personally is after every term, after every 6 weeks, I designate 5 off days. And those 5 off days are for me to reevaluate things, to take a look at the curriculum, what's working, what's not, and just a time of rest before we jump back into that consistency. I like taking these breaks again in the fall, throughout the year, in the spring when things are cooler, and having that downtime then. But what I've also found that this is helpful for is if a child gets sick, then we can take that day off, take 2 days off even, 3 days off, and we're still on target for our yearly goals and finishing where we want to finish off because we just pull from those 5 buffer days, if you will. And so that still gives us some rest. Sometimes it's a little bit out of order. I'll still use that time for planning and kind of adjusting here and there. But it keeps us on track ultimately, and that margin just really helps give everybody that breather that we need to move on after we've made it through that challenge or hiccup, whatever it is. Tip number 4, you'll want to identify what is your idea of a minimum school day. So this is going to vary depending on state requirements. There may be a certain number of hours that you need to log in. If that's the case, then you may have to get a little bit more creative with what qualifies as science or what qualifies as something like history. Could it be a video that they watch if they're sick but still working toward those hours? That's something that you'll have to determine based on your unique set of circumstances. But if you know your specific requirements for a minimum school day, then it gives you some flexibility. So for example, when we're going through a very, very, very challenging season, I wanted to make sure we had our non-negotiables done every day anyway. So non-negotiables for us were discipleship or Bible, reading, ELA or writing, and math, and then something extra. So that extra could be from any of the other buckets. It could be science, it could be history, it could be life skills, creative arts, it could be PE and health. But there had to be something else on. It could be a field trip, and that would count as a day for us so we could keep moving forward. So when it comes to doing that minimum school day, that was part of the inspiration for my lesson plan layout. So on this side, for example, I had the 3 buckets of just reading, writing, and math. And so I would just plug in the basics here. I use this a number of ways. When I had a little one, I just kind of plugged in all her activities here for a while. But on this side, I had the other 6 buckets. So it was discipleship, social studies, science, PE health, creative arts, and life skills. And so I would just plug in a number of activities that particular season and then be able to cross them off on whatever days we were able to get to them. So it wasn't always necessarily every day we did this. It was just, we did discipleship every single day. So I filled up those 5 boxes and then I just kind of plugged some in here and there. And then when we got to them, I would just mark it. When we got to the end of this and this, then that was 5 days of school. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we could mark that on our perpetual calendar and just keep moving forward. So that's just an idea. I don't know what layout plan you use, but this was helpful for those seasons. And then I changed it up as I went, but it was versatile enough that I could use it in both cases. Once we got into a more consistent season, things kind of settled for us, then I bumped that up to 2 or 3 extra things on top of our non-negotiable 4, and that qualified for a homeschool day. So you'll have some flexibility, a lot more when the kids are young, when they're little bitty. Just doing those basics is what's of utmost important. Reading books, enjoying that time out in nature. We put so much pressure on ourselves that they have to have this history and that history and that history. And then once you get over here, you realize, oh, we didn't need to stress out quite so much. They're still going to get it again in middle school. They're going to get it again in high school. And whatever they grasp in the little years is just to give them that exposure. You can do some memory work and start introducing them to those things. But as far as having to drill it 5 days a week, 45 minutes a day, not necessary in those younger years. So keep that in mind. Identify what your minimum school day is. What are your non-negotiables during those challenging seasons? And then once you are back in a rhythm, what can you add on and keep moving forward with? Tip number 5, adjust the curriculum to work for you. You'll want to make sure that the curriculum you choose works for you in this particular season. Now, there are curricula that already take that into consideration, and so they only schedule lessons for, let's say, 120 days a school year or 150 days a school year. Those are the types of curricula you'll want to lean toward if you know you're coming up into a more challenging season. If you're going to have a big move, if you're expecting a baby or you're fostering, anything like that, that you know, okay, we can't dedicate 40 minutes a day every single day for this one curriculum. Choose something that is condensed, choose something that has a fewer number of days, and it'll give you those breaks throughout the week to move forward and to have that rest that you need to keep you afloat. Another idea is if you do have a curriculum that you absolutely love and it is scheduled for 180 days, then consider doing it over 2 school years. So maybe do it 1.5 years and then start another one and then do that one 1.5 years. Look at ways that you can use a curriculum as a tool rather than as a dictator. I struggled a lot with trying to keep up with curricula at the expense of our peace in our home, at the expense of my own health, and many times just wanting to keep pushing forward. And then what I found was we repeated most of that stuff anyway. So I'm talking more about the other 6 buckets, not the primary academic buckets. I'm talking about your science and your history, once again, your arts, geography, those types of things that don't necessarily have to be done every single day of every single week of every single homeschool year to be effective. Through read alouds and things like that, there are other ways that you can target those areas that will be meaningful to your children and that don't require that huge amount of time. So get creative with how you use curriculum. What really helps in this case is the bucket planning system that I shared. If you go back to where I talk about the big picture, that's where we established our goals, and then based on those goals, we chose a curricula and resources that would support that. And so when there is a time of need, when there is a time when we're strapped for time, then we can look at those goals and say, you know what? For now, we're not going to focus on history and science. We're going to focus on the arts. We're going to focus on life skills. This is a season where we're going to focus on health and just getting the kids moving again and back to health. And so that may be a season and something you do for a month or a term. And then the next term, now we're just going to focus on history for a while. And you can switch it up, block it out however you'd like to make it work for you. Think about how it works even in a public school system. There are block systems in some cases where they do one thing one semester and one thing the second semester. And then another truth that you need to be aware of is that in most cases, the public school teachers don't get through everything in their curriculum books every single year. They get through a small part of it because there are pep rallies to tend to and all sorts of different agendas that they have to teach, like anti-bullying campaigns and things like that. There's always something going on where they don't always have the full amount of time, and they make adjustments as needed. And so sometimes we as homeschool moms, we put more pressure on ourselves than we absolutely need to. Now, what I'm not saying is, don't do anything, sit back and relax and just take it with a grain of salt. We do have that responsibility before the Lord to disciple our children, to teach them his ways, to admonish them, to encourage them, to grow them in wisdom. And so we want to be faithful with that responsibility that we have. But we also want to be faithful in teaching them how to walk forward and how to handle those challenging seasons, how to handle those difficult days and still prepare them for what the Lord has in store for them in the future. Now, my bonus tip kind of teeter-totters between both of those. And it's basically to give yourself grace. There are going to be times along the way where you may find that you just cannot do school for a small period of time. If you have your goals, if you know that them cooking meals, ministering to another family, ministering to their own family, creating things through art and music, if those are your goals for your homeschool, then you can rest knowing that you're still moving forward toward what the Lord has placed in your heart. And so that is why I stress over and over again when we did our vision planning of starting with the end in mind of prayer, praying to God for direction, letting the Holy Spirit lead you, and then allowing yourself to walk in that peace and that grace, knowing that he is in control and he loves your children very much and he loves you and he wants you to seek him each and every day. And so sometimes that's going to look completely different than what we had in mind. But if we're ultimately seeking him and keeping our eyes on him and teaching our children to love him and to know him and to love one another, if our children know how to read well and write well and do math well, then they will be prepared for anything that comes ahead. Even if they decide to go into the field of science and they didn't get a ton in the younger years, if they know how to learn, they can learn about anything. And that is our job as homeschool moms, is to prepare them for that, to prepare them to be disciples of the Lord, to prepare them to know how to learn, to know how to think critically. And those are things that can't always be taught with a curriculum. Oftentimes, the most important learning is a learning that takes place outside of the curriculum. It's a learning that takes place through conversations as we go by the way, as we walk by the way. It's the learning that takes place through those discussions that come after watching the news or after reading a great story. There's so much learning that is constantly taking place when we're investing in our children, when we're engaging with our children, that we need to make sure that we don't dismiss that for just school book learning and not see the value in that. And so I want to encourage you today that if you're in a season where things just don't seem to be going the way you'd like them to go, know and trust that you're right where the Lord wants you to be. And if you seek him and let him lead you and guide you, he will pull you through. He will direct your steps. And ultimately, he'll give you the tools and the experiences you need to teach your children how to walk by faith, how to trust in him above all, and how to be faithful with what they have each and every day. So do the next thing, Mama. Move forward, pray, work toward those goals, keep your eyes on the most important things, and make adjustments as needed to make it all happen. I hope this was helpful to you. If so, please give me a thumbs up. It's an easy way to support my channel. I pray blessings over you and happy homeschooling.